I'm Sadie Williams, 58 years old, and for most of my life being Ethan's mother was my greatest joy. We shared everything until Amanda entered the picture. I never imagined the woman my son loved would destroy our bond with just a few words. The night before his wedding, with cold eyes, she said, "After tomorrow, you're not part of this family." So I made the hardest choice of my life. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If my story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life storytellers. Get ready, because what happened the next morning changed everything. The day I became a mother was the most profound moment of my life. I still remember holding my tiny son, Ethan, in my arms, his eyes barely open, his little fingers wrapped tightly around mine. I whispered promises to him that I would always protect him, always be there for him, always put him first. Promises I kept for over 30 years until the day I couldn't. When Ethan was 5, my husband Paul died unexpectedly from a heart attack. One ordinary Tuesday, he kissed us goodbye and never came home. Just like that, our family of 3 became 2, and I became everything to my little boy. Mother, father, provider, protector. Those early years were a blur of grief and exhaustion. I worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant during the day and waitressing 3 nights a week, just to keep our modest home and provide Ethan with opportunities. I remember nights when I'd come home after a double shift, my feet swollen back aching to find Ethan had fallen asleep waiting up for me, his math homework spread across the kitchen table. I'd carry him to bed, then sit with his homework, making sure it was complete for the next day. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. But despite our challenges, Ethan and I created a beautiful life together. We had Sunday pancake mornings where we'd experiment with crazy toppings. Chocolate chips and banana was his favorite. Every summer, we'd save for our annual 3-day trip to a little cottage by Lake Michigan. We couldn't afford much, but those simple traditions meant everything. As a single parent, I learned to be both soft and strong. When Ethan needed comfort after being bullied in middle school, I held him close. When he needed to learn responsibility, I stood firm. Every decision I made, every extra shift I took, every night I spent sewing torn jeans instead of buying new ones, it was all for him. Ethan grew into an incredible young man. Smart, kind, hardworking, everything a mother could hope for. He excelled in school, especially in math and computer science. When he received a partial scholarship to study computer engineering at the state university, I nearly burst with pride. I took on a 3rd job cleaning offices on weekends to help cover the remaining tuition. The day he graduated, watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown, I felt like we'd both accomplished something extraordinary. After college, Ethan's career in software engineering took off. He moved to the city about an hour from my home and secured a position at a respected tech company. Despite his busy schedule, he never missed our weekly Sunday dinners. He'd drive back to our old neighborhood, bringing groceries and often a small gift. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful little things he knew I'd appreciate, but would never buy for myself. A scented candle, a paperback mystery novel, cozy socks for winter. My boy remembered the little things just as I had always done for him. I remember the Sunday Ethan first mentioned Amanda. There was a new light in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Mom, I've met someone amazing," he said, helping me wash dishes after dinner. "Her name is Amanda. She's in marketing at my company. I think you'd really like her." And 3 weeks later, he brought her to dinner. Amanda was undeniably beautiful. Tall, slender, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an impressive wardrobe. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and complimented my modest home with what seemed like genuine warmth. She asked thoughtful questions about Ethan's childhood, laughed at my stories, and seemed interested in getting to know me. "Your son is incredible, Sadie," she said as they were leaving. "Now I see where he gets it from." I was touched and hopeful. But looking back, I can pinpoint small moments that should have concerned me. The way she subtly redirected Ethan when he started telling an inside joke we shared. How she answered her phone twice during dinner, despite Ethan's gentle frown. The comment about how quaint it was that we still had our weekly dinners at his age. But I brushed these thoughts aside. After all, Ethan was happy, and that's what mattered most to me. 8 months after they began dating, Ethan brought Amanda to Sunday dinner and announced their engagement. He was beaming as Amanda displayed a stunning diamond ring. I hugged them both, tears of joy in my eyes, genuinely happy that my son had found love. That night, as I washed dishes alone after they left early for a celebration with her friends, I felt a mix of emotions, pride, joy, and yes, a small ache, knowing our relationship would naturally shift. But I never imagined how dramatic that shift would become. "We're thinking a spring wedding," Ethan had said excitedly. "Nothing too big, just meaningful." If only I had known what meaningful would come to exclude. The first sign that something was off came when I called Ethan to offer help with wedding planning. I'd been setting aside a modest sum each month since he graduated college, knowing someday he might need it for a wedding or home. It wasn't much compared to what I imagined Amanda's family could contribute, but it was given with all my heart. "That's sweet, Mom," Ethan said when I mentioned my savings. "But Amanda's parents have it covered. They want to give us a proper wedding." "Well, I'd still love to help with the planning," I offered. "Maybe I could look at venues with you both this weekend." There was an awkward pause. "Actually, we've already picked the Grand Terrace Hotel. Amanda's mom has connections there." This became a pattern over the following weeks. Every time I reached out to participate in wedding preparations, decisions had already been made. The venue, the caterer, the color scheme, all chosen without my input. I tried calling Amanda directly, hoping to establish a relationship with my future daughter-in-law. "I'd love to take you to lunch," I suggested. "Maybe we could look at flower arrangements afterward." "Oh, that's so nice of you, Sadie," she replied, her voice pleasant but distant. "But I've already booked the florist. My mother and I have very specific ideas for the aesthetic. But rain check on that lunch." The rain check was never cashed. As months passed, our weekly Sunday dinners became less frequent. Ethan was swamped at work or helping Amanda with wedding stuff. When he did visit, he often arrived late and left early, checking his phone constantly. One Sunday, when he actually made it to dinner, I asked about the mother-son dance. "I was thinking maybe we could use the song your father and I danced to at our wedding," I suggested. "He would have been so proud to see you now." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Mom Amanda thinks the mother-son and father-daughter dances are a bit outdated. We're going to skip those traditions." I felt a sharp pang, but nodded understanding. "Of course it's your wedding." "Amanda appreciates you understanding," he replied, the phrasing striking me as odd. It wasn't Amanda's understanding that mattered in that moment. It was between my son and me. The wedding was 3 months away when I received an invitation in the mail, an actual formal invitation, as if I were any other guest. Inside was a handwritten note from Amanda. "We've seated you with some lovely family friends. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time." I called Ethan immediately. "Honey, I just got the invitation. There must be some misunderstanding. Traditionally, the mother of the groom is included in the processional and sits in the front row." "Mom," he sighed, that new edge of impatience in his voice. "Amanda's family is paying for everything. They have certain expectations about how things should be done. But surely they understand that both families have important roles, regardless of who's paying." "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "Amanda's really stressed with all the planning. Could you just go along with things?" The final blow came when I learned from my sister Joan that there was a bridal shower I hadn't been invited to. She'd seen photos on social media. Amanda surrounded by friends and her family opening gifts and playing games. "I'm sure it was just an oversight," Joan said kindly, but we both knew better. I tried once more to connect with Amanda, inviting her for tea at a lovely cafe downtown. To my surprise, she accepted. She arrived 20 minutes late, impeccably dressed. "Amanda," I began carefully after our pleasantries, "I feel like there's been some distance between us. I want you to know that I'm here to support both of you, not to interfere." She stirred her tea slowly. "Sadie, I appreciate that, but you need to understand that Ethan and I are starting our own family now. Things can't be the way they were when he was just yours." "Of course," I agreed. "I completely respect that. I just hope there's room for me in your new life together." Amanda's seamless smile didn't reach her eyes. "There's room for everyone who respects our boundaries." The implication was clear. She believed I didn't. My longtime friend Harriet noticed the changes in me. "You seem down lately, Sadie. Is everything okay with Ethan's wedding plans?" I confided my concerns, the steady pattern of exclusion, the growing distance. Harriet listened intently, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Have you talked to Ethan about how you're feeling?" I had tried in careful ways, not wanting to come across as the stereotypical interfering mother-in-law. But each attempt was met with the same response: I was being too sensitive. Amanda was under stress. Things would settle after the wedding. But as the wedding drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't going to improve. In fact, I feared they would only get worse. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale restaurant I'd never been to before. Amanda's parents had arranged everything, and it was undeniably elegant. White roses and candles on every table, a private room with views of the city skyline, waitstaff in formal attire. I wore my best dress, a navy blue sheath I'd splurged on for the occasion, and arrived early, nervous but determined to be positive. Amanda's mother, Diane, greeted me with air kisses. "Sadie, so good of you to come. We've seated you at table 3 with some of our family friends." I glanced at the seating chart. Table 1 was for the bridegroom and both sets of parents, except I wasn't listed there. Amanda's parents, her unmarried sister, who was maid of honor, and her grandmother occupied those privileged spots beside my son. I swallowed my hurt and made my way to table 3, where I was seated with distant cousins of Amanda's family and an elderly great-aunt who was hard of hearing. Throughout the 4-course meal, I watched Ethan from across the room, laughing and engaged with Amanda's family. He glanced my way occasionally, but never came over. During the toasts, Amanda's father stood and spoke at length about welcoming Ethan into their family, about how Amanda had finally found a man worthy of her. He spoke about their future together, the grandchildren they hoped for. He never once acknowledged me or Ethan's upbringing. When the plates were cleared, I gathered my courage and approached the main table. "Ethan, could I speak with you for a moment?" He looked surprised, but nodded, excusing himself from Amanda, who frowned slightly. I led him to a quiet corner and reached into my purse. "I have something for you. It was going to be for tomorrow, but I thought tonight might be better." I handed him a small box. Inside was his grandfather's watch, a simple but elegant timepiece that had been carefully preserved. "Your father wore this on our wedding day. I've been saving it for yours." Ethan opened the box, his eyes widening. "Mom, this is... wow." For a moment, I saw my boy, again genuine emotion in his face. "Thank you." But before he could say more, Amanda appeared beside us. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the watch. "My dad's watch," Ethan explained. "Mom saved it for me to wear tomorrow." Amanda's smile tightened. "Oh, that's thoughtful, but we've already coordinated all the accessories with the photographer. Your cufflinks match my jewelry, remember?" She turned to me. "It's a vintage look that complements our aesthetic." "The watch could be just for him, not for the photos," I suggested gently. Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly. "Could we discuss this privately? There's a small room just over there." I followed them, a growing sense of dread in my stomach. Once the door closed behind us, Amanda's demeanor changed completely. "I've been trying to be patient, Sadie, but you're not getting it," she said, her voice cold. "This is our wedding, not yours. Every detail has been planned to perfection, and I won't have last-minute changes. It's just a watch, I replied, stunned by her tone. A family heirloom. It's never just anything with you, she snapped. It's always some emotional manipulation. The dance song from your wedding, the constant calls and suggestions, the guilt trips when Ethan misses one of your precious Sunday dinners. I looked at my son, expecting him to defend me, to recognize the unfairness of these accusations. But he stood silently, his eyes on the floor. Ethan and I are starting fresh, Amanda continued. We don't need the baggage of his old life weighing us down. After tomorrow, you're not part of this family anymore. We'll be starting our own traditions, our own life. The words hit me like physical blows. I struggled to breathe, to process what she was saying. Amanda? Ethan finally spoke, his voice quiet. That's a bit harsh. Is it? She challenged. You've said yourself your mom can be too involved, too emotional. You agreed we needed boundaries. Boundaries, yes, but nothing. I've watched you check your phone every Sunday, dreading those guilt-inducing calls. I've seen how she tries to pull you back to your old life. Well, after tomorrow, that stops. I found my voice, though it shook. Ethan, is this how you feel too? He wouldn't meet my eyes. In his silence, I had my answer. I see, I whispered, tears filling my eyes. I reached for the watch box, but Amanda moved it away. We'll keep this, she said. Maybe someday, when it fits our aesthetic. I looked at my son one last time, willing him to speak, to show some sign of the boy I'd raised. But he remained silent, a stranger in an expensive suit. I walked out of that room with as much dignity as I could muster. Joan, seeing my face, immediately gathered her things to follow me. In the parking lot, tears streaming down my face, I told her what had happened. That little witch, Joan gasped. And Ethan just stood there. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. Come home with me, Joan insisted. You shouldn't be alone. But I needed space, needed to think. I declined her offer and drove home alone, my heart shattered into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be reassembled. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind replayed Amanda's words over and over. After tomorrow, you're not part of this family anymore. And worse than her cruelty was Ethan's silence, his tacit agreement that I could be so easily discarded after a lifetime of devotion. As I sat in my darkened living room, memories flooded back unbidden. Ethan's first steps taken toward me with a triumphant giggle, the countless nights I'd sat beside his bed when childhood fevers struck, cool washcloth in hand, praying for morning. The time he broke his arm falling from a tree at age 9, and how he'd asked the doctor if his mom could have a lollipop too, because she was being so brave. I remembered his first heartbreak at 16, when Lisa Jenkins broke up with him before prom, how he'd collapsed into my arms sobbing like he hadn't since he was small. You'll always have me, I'd promised him. No matter what, I'll always be here. A promise I had kept faithfully. Until now, when keeping it meant potentially ruining his wedding day. Around 3 a.m., I called Joan. I knew she'd be awake. My sister has suffered from insomnia for years. I don't know what to do, I confessed when she answered. If I go tomorrow, Amanda will see it as a challenge. She might make a scene. It would ruin Ethan's day. And if you don't go, Joan asked gently, then I miss my only child's wedding, a day I've dreamed about since he was born. We talked for an hour, considering every angle. Joan, always the protective sister, favored confrontation. You have every right to be there. Don't let that woman win. But it wasn't about winning. It was about my son's happiness on what should be one of the most joyful days of his life. At 5 a.m., I called Harriet. Unlike Joan, Harriet had always been the voice of measured reason in my life. What does your heart tell you? She asked after I explained everything. That I love my son too much to turn his wedding into a battleground. Then you have your answer, she said simply. I spent the next hour writing a letter to Ethan. I poured everything into those pages. My love for him, my pain at his silence, my hopes for his future happiness despite everything. I explained that my absence wasn't abandonment, but an act of love, sparing him conflict on his wedding day. I wrote about how being his mother had been the greatest privilege of my life, and that no matter what that bond could never truly be severed. Not in my heart. As dawn broke, I made my decision. I wouldn't attend the wedding. I texted Ethan a short message. I love you too much to cause problems today. I wish you every happiness in your marriage. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Then I turned off my phone. I packed a small overnight bag and drove to the coastal cottage we'd visited when Ethan was young. It wasn't the same one. That had been sold years ago, but a similar rental in the same area. I'd booked it on impulse the previous week, never imagining I'd be using it as a refuge rather than a place to celebrate post-wedding. The cottage was simple. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a porch overlooking the water. I sat on that porch as the hours passed watching families play on the beach below. Children building sandcastles. Parents applying sunscreen. Ordinary moments of love and care. At 2 p.m., when Ethan would be saying his vows, I closed my eyes and pictured him, not in his wedding suit, but as the little boy who once proclaimed me the best mom in the universe. I broke down completely then. Great heaving sobs that came from the depths of my soul. Grief not just for missing the wedding, but for the relationship that seemed irretrievably lost. For the future grandchildren I might never know. For Sunday dinners that would no longer happen. For my son, who had chosen someone who could so casually dismiss his mother. I cried until no more tears would come, until I was empty and exhausted. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the beach, there was a knock at the cottage door. It was Harriet, holding a bag of groceries and a bottle of wine. "How did you find me?" I asked, astonished. "You mentioned booking this place last week," she explained. "I took a chance. You shouldn't be alone tonight, Sadie." She made us a simple dinner, poured generous glasses of wine, and listened as I talked through my pain again. Unlike Joan Harriet, offered no judgment, no suggestions for retaliation. She simply bore witness to my grief, validating its enormity. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. "Now you begin to build a life that doesn't revolve around Ethan," she said kindly but firmly. "It's time, Sadie. It has been for a long time." I knew she was right. For 30 years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Ethan's mother. Now I needed to rediscover who Sadie Williams was on her own terms. As we sat on the porch watching the stars emerge over the lake, I felt something unexpected amid my pain. A tiny flicker of possibility. A life reshaped no longer defined solely by motherhood. It was terrifying, but also, in some small way, I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet liberating. I returned home on Sunday evening to a house that felt emptier than it ever had. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls from Ethan, 15 from Joan. Dozens of text messages, some from numbers I didn't recognize. I started with Joan's messages. Apparently, my absence had caused exactly the scene I'd hoped to avoid. Amanda had told guests I'd abandoned Ethan just as I supposedly had throughout his life when work took precedence. A complete fabrication that painted me as a neglectful mother who couldn't even show up for her son's wedding. Ethan's voicemails progressed from confused to angry. The final one left at 1 a.m. that morning was slurred and hostile. "You embarrassed me on the most important day of my life," he said. "Amanda was right about you all along." I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Ethan and I had shared thousands of meals, and felt strangely calm. The pain was still there, a physical ache in my chest. But now, it was accompanied by something else: clarity. I had spent decades prioritizing Ethan's feelings over my own. I had accepted blame to spare him discomfort. I had overlooked slights and swallowed hurts. But I wouldn't be cast as the villain in a story Amanda was creating. I took my carefully written letter and placed it in an envelope with a copy of the text Amanda had kept from him, the one explaining my absence as an act of love, not abandonment. I mailed it the next morning, signature required. 2 days later, social media provided a window into their lives that was both painful and enlightening. Photos of the wedding showed Ethan looking handsome but tense. Amanda beamed in every shot, surrounded by her family. The comments were filled with congratulations, but also questions. Where was Ethan's mom? Heard there was drama with the mother-in-law. And Amanda's responses painted a picture of a troubled relationship, implying long-standing issues that had culminated in my deliberate absence. A narrative was being created, and in it, I was the antagonist. For the next several weeks, I moved through life as if underwater. I went to work at the elementary school office where I'd been employed for 15 years. I smiled at colleagues and parents. I came home to my empty house. But inside, I was hollowed out. Joan checked on me daily, her initial anger at Ethan evolving into concern for me. "You need to talk to someone professional," she insisted finally. "This isn't just sadness, Sadie. I'm worried about depression." I knew she was right. Through my employee assistance program, I began seeing a therapist named Dr. Marshall. In our first session, I cried more than I spoke. By our third, I was able to articulate the complex tangle of emotions: grief, betrayal, anger, and most painfully love that hadn't diminished despite everything. "What you're experiencing is a form of ambiguous loss," Dr. Marshall explained. "Your son is still alive, but the relationship you knew is gone. There's no ritual for mourning this kind of loss, no casserole brigade or sympathy cards. That makes it particularly difficult to process." With Dr. Marshall's guidance, I began making small changes. I repainted my living room, choosing a vibrant blue I'd always loved but thought too bold. I joined a community garden group, finding unexpected solace in coaxing plants from soil. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected when Ethan's needs took precedence. One evening, about 6 weeks after the wedding, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Jake, Ethan's friend since high school. He stood awkwardly on my porch, hands in his pockets. "Mrs. Williams. Sadie," he corrected himself. "I hope it's okay I stopped by." I invited him in, made coffee, and waited while he gathered his thoughts. "I'm worried about Ethan," he finally said. "He's not himself. Amanda controls everything. Who he sees, where they go, even how he spends his money. She checks his phone, his emails. He canceled our weekly basketball game because she said it took away from their newlywed time." "That sounds concerning," I said carefully. "It is," Jake insisted. "And the way she talks about you, she's convinced him you've been manipulating him his whole life, that you're toxic." The word stabbed me. Toxic. After all I'd sacrificed, all I'd given. "The thing is," Jake continued, "we all know that's not true. His friends, we remember how it really was. How you worked those extra jobs so he could go to computer camp. How you never missed a single game or concert, even when you were exhausted." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I tried to talk to him about what really happened with the wedding. But Amanda was there and she twisted everything, made it sound like I was attacking her." Jake looked down at his coffee. "I don't know how to help him." "You can't help someone who doesn't think they need help," I said gently. "I've learned that the hard way." As Jake left, he hugged me awkwardly. "He'll figure it out eventually. Ethan's smart, and he loves you even if he's confused right now." I wanted to believe him. But as weeks turned into months with no word from Ethan, Not on my birthday, not on Thanksgiving. Hope became harder to maintain. In early December, I made a decision. I would no longer put my life on hold, waiting for Ethan to remember who I really was. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the community college, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I volunteered at the local animal shelter. I said yes when Bill from my garden group asked me to dinner. I was building a life that wasn't centered on being Ethan's mother. It wasn't the life I'd expected to have, but it was becoming one I could find joy in nonetheless. 6 months after the wedding, on a rainy April evening, I was replanting herbs in pots on my kitchen windowsill when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Joan was in Florida visiting her daughter, and I had no plans with friends that night. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and opened the door to find Ethan standing there soaking wet from the rain, looking thinner than I remembered and somehow older. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking on that single syllable. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Then instinct took over, and I pulled him inside out of the rain. "You're soaked through. Let me get you a towel." I moved on autopilot, fetching towels, making tea, just as I had hundreds of times throughout his childhood. When I returned to the living room, he was standing exactly where I'd left him, looking lost. "Sit down," I said gently. "Please." He sank onto the couch, the same one where he'd studied for exams, where we'd watched movies together, where I'd held him through various heartbreaks and disappointments. "I got your letter," he said finally. "Just yesterday." I stared at him. "I mailed it 6 months ago." "Amanda kept it from me, along with all your other attempts to contact me." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Jake finally showed me the texts you sent, explained what really happened at the wedding." "I see," I said, careful to keep my tone neutral, though inside, anger flared at this confirmation of Amanda's interference. "I didn't know," Ethan continued. "About what she said to you before the wedding, about how she'd been keeping you away from the planning. I thought you were just being difficult." "Difficult," I repeated. The word hung between us. "I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. I let her convince me that your love was actually control, that your concern was manipulation." He looked up, his eyes filled with tears. "Been blind." "What happened?" I asked instead. Over the next hour, Ethan told me everything. How Amanda's controlling behavior had extended to every aspect of their lives. How she'd isolated him from friends, monitoring his phone and email. How she'd belittled his work, his interests, his opinions. How she'd turned family events into performances where they presented as the perfect couple while their private reality was anything but. "She has these outbursts," he explained, "when things aren't exactly as she wants them. At first I thought it was just wedding stress. Then I thought it was adjustment to marriage. But it never stopped." "Why are you here now?" I asked. It came out more bluntly than I'd intended, but I needed to know. "Last week she threw out my old college sweatshirt, said it was ratty and embarrassing. It was just a sweatshirt, but it was also my dad's. You gave it to me when I left for college, remember?" I nodded. Paul's university sweatshirt worn soft with age. I'd kept it all those years, occasionally holding it to my face to search for any lingering trace of him. When I got upset, she said I was being pathetically sentimental over trash, and that I needed to cut the cord with my past. That's when I realized she doesn't just want to control our present and future. She wants to erase my past, erase you. I took a deep breath. "Ethan, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I need you to understand something. I love you. I have always loved you and will always love you. But I can't just pick up where we left off as if nothing happened. You stood silent while Amanda told me I wasn't part of your family anymore. You believed the worst of me despite a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. His face crumpled. I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving, I said carefully. It's about trust. Trust that's been broken and needs to be rebuilt. I'm willing to try, but things can't go back to how they were. What does that mean? It means I've spent 6 months building a life that doesn't revolve around being your mother. I've discovered parts of myself that were subsumed by that role for decades. I won't give that up. I paused, choosing my words carefully. It also means I need to know you'll stand up for me for us if Amanda continues to try to come between us. Ethan nodded slowly. I've started seeing a therapist. I've been trying to understand how I let this happen, how I could have been so blind to who she really is, so quick to dismiss who you really are. And your marriage? I asked gently. We're in counseling, he said. I don't know if it will work. Part of me thinks it can't, that the foundation was rotten from the start. But I need to try, to be sure. I respected that, even as part of me wanted to urge him to leave immediately. Whatever happens, I'm here. Not as the mother who will fix everything or prioritize your needs above my own, but as someone who loves you and wants to support you in healthy ways. When Ethan left that night, our relationship wasn't magically restored. But a door had been opened. A possibility of something new, something different, but perhaps ultimately stronger. I called Dr. Marshall the next morning and scheduled an emergency session. My son came to see me, I explained. And how are you feeling about that? She asked. Hopeful, I said, but also afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of slipping back into old patterns. That awareness is important, she said. It will help you navigate this new chapter. Over the following months, Ethan and I rebuilt our relationship with careful intention. We started with weekly phone calls, then occasional lunches at neutral locations. He respected my boundaries, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. I listened without judgment as he worked through his conflicted feelings about his marriage, offering support, but not direction. Amanda, when she learned about our reconnection, was predictably furious. She issued ultimatums. She threatened divorce. When those tactics failed, she reluctantly agreed to include me in occasional activities, though her coldness was palpable. Their marriage counseling continued with mixed results. Some weeks, Ethan seemed hopeful. Others, defeated. I remained a steady presence, neither encouraging him to leave nor to stay. That decision had to be his alone. 1 year after the wedding that I didn't attend, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. My creative writing class had led to a small group of dedicated writers who met weekly in my living room. My volunteer work at the animal shelter had evolved into a part-time role coordinating senior dog adoptions. My garden produced vegetables I shared with neighbors, creating new community connections. And most surprisingly, Bill from the garden group and I continued dating. A gentle, uncomplicated relationship that brought warmth and companionship back into my life. At 59, I was experiencing a kind of renaissance, discovering aspects of myself that had been dormant during my years of single motherhood. Ethan noticed these changes. "You seem happy, Mom," he said during one of our lunches. "Really happy." "I am," I acknowledged. Not in the way I expected to be at this point in my life, but yes, I'm happy. His marriage to Amanda continued, though I sensed it was more from his stubborn determination to make it work than from genuine contentment. He'd established firm boundaries with her regarding his relationships with friends and with me, which created ongoing tension between them. In late spring, Amanda's grandmother became ill, requiring her to travel home for several weeks. During her absence, Ethan seemed to breathe more freely. He came for dinner at my house, bringing wine and dessert. As we sat on the porch afterward, he asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you think people can change, fundamentally change? I considered my answer carefully. I think people can grow, can become more aware of their patterns and work to alter them. But I don't think the core of who someone is changes easily or quickly. He nodded, staring into his wine glass. That's what I'm afraid of. 2 months later, Ethan moved out of the home he shared with Amanda. They weren't divorced yet. That would come later. But the separation marked the beginning of the end. He didn't move back home with me, which I respected. Instead, he found an apartment close to his work and began the difficult process of untangling his life from Amanda's. The holidays approached, bringing their own complicated emotions. After much discussion, we decided to host a small Thanksgiving dinner at my house. Joan and her husband would come along with Harriet Bill and a few close friends. Ethan would join us his first holiday as a separated man. The day was filled with good food, laughter, and a surprising lack of tension. As we gathered around the table, I'd carefully set with my mother's china, I looked at the faces of those I loved and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Before we eat, Joan said, raising her glass, I'd like to make a toast to my sister. Sadie, you've shown incredible strength and grace this past year. You've rebuilt your life while keeping your heart open. We're all better for having you in our lives. Tears pricked my eyes as glasses clinked. Across the table, Ethan's gaze met mine, conveying what words couldn't. His regret, his love, his respect for the woman I'd become in the wake of pain he'd helped cause. Later, as guests departed and Ethan helped me wash dishes, just like old times, yet completely different, he said, I'm filing for divorce next week. I squeezed his hand, but didn't ask for details. He would share when he was ready. I understand now, he continued, what real love looks like. It's not possession or control. It's what you've always given me. Room to grow, to make mistakes, even to hurt you, while still being there when I found my way back. That's what being a mother is, I said simply. No, he corrected gently. That's what being you is. Not every mother loves like that. The journey back to each other hadn't been easy or straight. There were still moments of tension, conversations that needed to be had, healing that remained incomplete. But standing in my kitchen with my son beside me, both of us changed by what we'd endured. I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. I've learned that family isn't defined by those who claim the title or by blood alone. It's built through actions, through showing up, through love that gives freedom rather than demands compliance. Sometimes the people we expect to be family fail us profoundly. And sometimes healing comes not from forgiving too quickly or pretending hurt didn't happen, but from setting firm boundaries and requiring respect. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to rediscover yourself, to build a life rich with meaning beyond a single role or relationship. My identity as Ethan's mother will always be important to me, but it's no longer all that I am. If you're struggling with family estrangement or rebuilding a relationship after betrayal, know that healing is possible, though it may not look like you expected. The path forward isn't about going back to what was, but creating something new that honors both your pain and your worth. Have you experienced something similar in your family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life journeys and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for being part of this community where we can share our truths and find strength in each other's stories.